Just three ordinary guys trying to understand the crazy world around them. We don't have all the answers, but we've got all the questions. You're listening to Just Add Bourbon with Jimmy, JD, and Brad.
Hey everybody, I'm Jimmy Don Kerr.
I'm Brad Broaddus.
And I'm JD Dammer.
And this is the Just Add Bourbon podcast. So this week, guys, we're going to do something a little different. If you've checked out some of our previous episodes, we usually do some current events. And what we're going to do this week, this topic actually came from you guys, the listeners. We had some people write in and say, hey, this could be an interesting topic for you guys to discuss. And so we thought we would try it this week. So what the listeners wrote in about was an investigation that has been opened up or approved in New York City about 9/11. And so we thought with 9/11 being this week, the 18th anniversary of 9/11, this could be a pretty interesting topic to talk about and talk about some of the conspiracies and some of the different things that go along with 9/11. 9/11 is one of those things, guys, that I remember very well. I think in our generation, you remember where you were when 9/11 happened. I know when I heard it on the radio for the first time, I was actually at a gas station getting gas. I was at Fastlane on Route 3 getting gas. JD, do you remember where you were when 9/11 happened?
I remember vividly 9/11. Chase, who was on the episode last week, was born on September 13th. His original birthday was supposed to be in 9/11. So we were actually standing in the lobby of the doctor's office when the towers fell to the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Brad, what about you? Remember where you were?
I was at a gas station as well. I was at a get and go in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some EMTs came running in the gas station, and they were asking to turn on. There was a little radio on the counter, and they were asking to turn on the radio. They said the towers had been hit.
That's crazy. So I want to read for you the article that was sent to us by multiple listeners and to give you an idea of what's going on, because this is fairly current. It says New York area fire commissioners have called for a new investigation into 9/11, claiming that overwhelming evidence of pre-planted explosive caused the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center buildings. And this is the Franklin Square and Mason fire districts. They're outside of Queens, and they had several several firemen from their districts actually perish when the towers fell. So there's 1,000 different conspiracy theories, or what you would call coincidences, about 9/11, and I thought it'd be interesting for us to kind of get into some of those. The first of which, I guess, would be the actual towers themselves being hit by planes. We know that it was hot because of all the fuel and all that. That was towers 1 and 2. And did those buildings fall because they were hit by airplanes and fire?
You know, the one thing that I always had questions about is if you watch demolitions and you watch those towers fall, it looks just like a controlled demolition. So, there's been a number of buildings, skyscrapers, that have been on fire. Not just for a couple hours, for hours and hours. And usually what that leaves is a skeleton with steel. And these fell demolition style right into their own footprint. And you had the 2 World Trade Center towers as well as Building 7. And Building 7, I think, was the 3rd building to ever collapse like that by fire. The first 2 being the 2 World Trade Centers.
Yeah, and what I found interesting, just in kind of looking to the topic this week, is you essentially had 7 buildings there in that World Trade Center area. And buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6 were all directly underneath. They were made of steel, and they were destroyed, but they were still standing. And they had 2 buildings actually topple down on top of them. Now, Building 7, which we'll get into in just a little bit, because as far as the coincidences and the different controversies and things that come out of it, Building 7 to me is one of the more interesting, or the one that's a little more coincidental maybe than the others. But you had these two giant structures, two of the tallest buildings in the world, fall down on top of buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6, and their skeleton was still there. They actually had to demo those down to clean them up.
And this has been something that's been going on for the last 18 years as far as people wanting to speak up, architects, engineers, that's questioned this, but they never have been able to get any media time, which is something that's changed recently, and I think because of the internet. But again, you watch the way that they fall. I'm not saying that's not what happened, but I can't find anything else that looks like that by fire.
Sure.
And there's interviews upon interviews of the people that were actually in the building. You know, it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, this and it looks like that. Hey, I'm not an engineer, an architect, or an expert on anything. But when the firefighters in the building are saying, we heard booms, we heard detonations going off. You know, a lot of that stuff was on the original broadcast on the news, and then they started cutting that stuff out. You didn't hear it anymore.
I honestly never gave a whole lot of thought. All I know is I seen two planes fly to 2 towers, and it caused a lot of carnage, a lot of wreckage. I'm really not a big conspiracy theory guy. Like, a lot of people are. I kind of maybe naive in a lot of ways, and I don't question. But I think I pretty clearly seen 2 planes fly to 2 towers, and so I never did have a big conspiracy about it. You know, I just felt like that.
Well, I think that will be good about this discussion today, because, I mean, I know I've done some research on this. I'm going to bring up some coincidences for you guys to discuss and just kind of think, you know, is that weird? You know, because it is weird.
Right.
I don't know exactly what happened either, to be honest with you, and I've never been a huge conspiracy guy myself, but there's a lot of really odd coincidences that came out of all that. And to me, the most coincidental is Building 7. Okay, you take out Building 1 and 2, they got hit by planes and they fell to the ground.
That's what I was just about to say is, you know, Tower 1 and 2, I don't know what happened. I know 2 planes hit them. Tower 7, I'm not sure why it even fell. I don't know the layout of how the plaza was there. I don't know. But all I know is the video, it looks like it's falling straight down too. And then at the end it does.
Well, it actually has the dimple that you see. I think they call that a dimple, like when they do demo buildings.
Yeah.
If you watch videos of Building 7, it actually breaks in the middle first. And that's what allows it to fall in on itself instead of toppling over. So, and there is a clear dimple in the top of the building, and it falls straight down into its footprint, just like all the other demolition videos you've ever seen. But here is an interesting coincidence about Building 7, okay? Building 7 was the hub of that World Trade Center park, okay? They had extra oxygen tanks there. It's where the mayor's secret bunker was. The SEC was in there, the CIA, the FBI, a bunch of different world banks. Different banks were all housed in Building 7. Well, there was a guy by the name of Larry Silverstein. I find this just funny. But there was a guy named Larry Silverstein. He took out a 99-year lease on the World Trade Center Park in the spring of 2001 for $15 million. Now, after he took out that lease, he proceeded to work on his insurance policies for all those buildings to include acts of terrorism. Okay?
Right.
Then the planes hit the Trade Center towers. They fall. He sues his insurance company. And he is able to fight them and says that there were 2 instances of terrorism. And he ends up netting $7 billion. So his $15 million investment turned into $7 billion after that.
And then there were some interviews with that Silverstein guy. And one of the interviews, he made the comment, yeah, I told him to pull it. Which, you know, that's a term used in controlled demolitions. Well, then later, after people started saying, well, he admitted right there that the building was brought down. Then he came back and he said, well, no, what I meant is we told them to pull the firefighters and people out of there. Well, this thing fell at like 5, 6 o'clock at night. They pulled the firefighters out of there at like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. There wasn't even anybody in there at the time. So the other part about that is if you were going, say that you looked at it and said, okay, it's beyond repair. We are going to bring this thing down. With it on fire, I mean, I would say that it probably takes weeks for them to set up a demolition anyway. So could you imagine a scenario where they go, okay, well, look, I know the thing's on fire and other 2 buildings have failed here, but let's sneak in there and go in there and rig up the beams and do what we need to do for a controlled demolition. It doesn't make any sense, which is the case with a lot of this stuff. You know, one of the things that originally got me questioning some of these things was when they found the guy's passport. They identified one of the hijackers because they found his passport on the sidewalk in New York City, a couple blocks from the World Trade Center. What is the mathematic probability of the FBI happens to find this passport for this one particular guy that you need to identify?
That was one of the things that I thought was most interesting about, I hate to use the word interesting in such a tragic event. But,
yeah, it's obviously tragic.
But, like, the planes hit the building, like, they had names up 30 minutes later, man. They was like, here's the guys that done it. We're pinning it on, it's like, what? You already knew they was going to do a thing. And, like, there's no way you gathered that much information that quickly. And that did throw up a flag to me, like.
Immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it was immediately. You're listening to the news and they say, it was like without nothing, no written, nothing. They just come out and say, okay, well, it was Osama bin Laden. And then...
But they had these people's mug pictures. I mean...
Yeah, the people flying the planes.
Yeah,
they had
like,
their mug shots almost immediately.
Oh, he's a 21-year-old from Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like...
Right, so if you know...
What's he doing here?
If you know that much about him 2 hours after it happened, then how did you had to have that information before.
Right.
Well, the other interesting thing with that particular building is that when it collapsed, it housed a lot of information on investigations that were being done into Enron and all these different corporations, and it all got destroyed. Which is, that's one of those, the things that make you go,
Right. Yeah.
That's one of those things, too, where I was like, okay. And not to mention that, in the days prior to, now I don't know how much you guys know about put options, on the stock market.
No, later on so.
What a put option is you can go in and you can essentially, it's like gambling. You can go in and you can buy essentially a stock or a derivative that says that the stock price of this company is going to go down. And when it does, you stand to make money. Well, the 2 airlines that were involved in the World Trade Center towers being hit were United and American. And in the weeks prior to, not the weeks, the days prior to that happening, the trading of that particular put option went up by 6 times.
Wow.
So the people who, basically what they invested in, they stood to make $5 million. Same thing with Citigroup. Some of the people that were housed inside of that building, same exact thing happened for multiple people were putting in those put options on a lot of these different companies that were directly tied to 9/11. Coincidence? I don't know. Right. But it's an interesting coincidence if it is.
Yeah. So, and that was something that people called out. So the investigations into those kept getting put off by the attorney of the Southern District of New York, which at that time was James Comey. And you notice every episode, the same names keep coming up over and over and over.
That's crazy. I didn't know that about James Comey.
I didn't know that either.
That's pretty crazy. So, but Brad's right though. I mean, the more you dig around in this stuff and you start looking around, it's always the same players. When the same people are always involved, when there's any kind of dust up or a conspiracy or whatever, something happens, the same people's names always come up. And I think you'll find too that Robert Mueller And there were some other people whose names will come up as well in some of this as we get into talking about this.
Well, there were a number of FBI agents that actually came forward and were basically, they were questioning why they weren't allowed to go after certain people. And anybody that they would go after that had anything to do with Saudi Arabia, they were shut down by the FBI director. And the FBI director was Robert Mueller, who was put into place on September the 4th, roughly a week before 9/11.
That's definitely right at a week. That is a week.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just crazy to think.
Crazy.
All the things that you've heard us talk about over the last 5 episodes, some of the things we've talked about, we've actually talked about these same people.
Right.
And things that are going on now, back then, were the key players involved then.
Yeah.
Which is pretty nuts.
It is crazy. It's crazy.
And again, we don't know. I have no clue what happened. I don't know what happened. I don't know who's responsible. But I have seen over the last 18 years, I followed some of these groups because the first thing I was told is I got on TV and I thought, well, this stuff looks kind of shady. Seems like they would look into this stuff. And then they would immediately have somebody come out on the news and they'd say, well, our families have been through too much and we just don't want this to be brought up. And I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. But then once you find out that it's tons and tons and tons of these families absolutely want to know what's going on. So some of those lawsuits that have come up now where they were able to, was it Saudi Arabia, Iran, a lot of these things now that they're allowed to go after these people. And there was a lot of crazy stuff just with, like I never understood everything was about Afghanistan. But they shut down everything that was leading towards Saudi Arabia or Iran. And you never heard that. To JD's point, it came on the news. It was Osama bin Laden, this guy that was suspected to have been on dialysis for years before this even happened.
Right.
He did it in a cave, with a Zach Morris cell phone, and just didn't make any sense.
So let me interject here. Do you know who Bill Cooper is?
I do not.
All right. So Bill Cooper is probably the father, or would be considered like the father of the conspiracy theory.
Okay.
He was maybe, so I've read that he was the Alex Jones of his time.
Okay.
And he has a book. What's the name of the book? The Pale Horse. It comes from Revelations.
Behold a pale horse.
Behold a Pale Horse. It's got a bunch of different conspiracy theories in it. There's some alien, the JFK assassination. He comes up with a few of his own. It's pretty interesting. But about 3 months prior to 9/11, he was doing a podcast or something along that line. Maybe a radio show, and he actually predicted that he didn't predict 9/11 per se, but he predicted that something was going to happen on our soil, and they would blame Osama bin Laden. And he said the reason why is that you've got the biggest intelligence agencies in the world hunting for this guy, and just some random reporter from CNN goes in his cave and does an interview with him and his top people.
Everybody in the world's looking for him, but this CNN reporter
finds him in a
cave.
cave.
Up in his cave, and then I guess gets past security, or maybe they ask somebody, they're like, "Hey, we were just going to get an interview. We know everybody's looking for you." Oh yeah, sure. Here, come sit in the living room.
Come sit down. Let's talk. So he predicts once he finds out that this happened, that this CNN reporter got this interview. He said, "You watch." He said, "It may not happen in the next 3 weeks, but it will happen. There will be some kind of an attack on American soil, and this is who they're going to blame." Well, then it happened, and after that happened, he predicted his own death. He said that they would kill him because he lived, I guess, in some house in a rural community.
Right.
And he said that they would kill him on his doorstep in the middle of the night. You want to know when he died and where he died? On his doorstep.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. And
That's
now, again, crazy coincidence? I don't know. But again, those are the kind of things that people have read and seen that makes the events around 9/11 maybe suspicious. I mean, I'm like Brad. I don't know what happened.
Right.
I wasn't there. But at the same time, it is interesting.
Now, I have watched a little bit of the Netflix documentary or these guys trying to build this conspiracy theory, and I thought some of that was a little bit silly. They said there's a bomb went off and the plane hit the building. Like he's like, you could see the bomb going off. You can see the window busting, obviously, shattered. Like I thought some of that was a little bit silly, but man, I just don't know. Like it's definitely possible.
Well,
it's definitely a coincidence. It's definitely interesting that these same names keep coming up.
Well, this was actually, there was a university in Alaska that actually, I guess, did a scientific study.
Yeah, it just came out last week.
Yeah, and that's part of it. Kind of ties into this. These commissioners, approving an investigation into what happened.
They were saying it was not brought down by fire.
There's no way it was brought down by fire.
I can't think all the names of the groups now. There are tons of groups of architects and engineers that have been trying to talk about this for 18 years, but they just get shut down because if you control what goes on the air, you can just shut these people out.
If you got all the information, you can bring it all you want.
And then something I was trying to look for some numbers on just the different, like the 911 Commission and how much they spent and some of that stuff, because one of the things was talking about Mueller shut down the government, I guess the FBI part of the investigation, in like 3 weeks. And so I was looking up some stuff on the 9/11 Commission. It said it was like a year and a half and spent $15 million. Sounds like a lot of money. Well, golly, we spent $32 million on the Mueller probe into Trump. If you go into the Ken Starr Whitewater investigation from years ago, they spent $70 million. So the biggest event in the history of our country, where we have terrorists flying airplanes into the Twin Towers,
Into the Pentagon.
We haven't even got there yet. Into the Pentagon, and we spend a year and a half investigating and $15 million.
Don't make a lot of sense, does it?
Doesn't make much sense.
No, and again, we're not saying that we know.
Right.
This is, that is, you can find what Brad just said. You can actually find that information. So you brought up the Pentagon, so let's get to the Pentagon.
Right. Let's get to the Pentagon.
So the only thing really that I know about the Pentagon is I've seen a few of the videos where there appears to be a missile hit the Pentagon before the plane, or a plane supposedly hit it. Is there even a video of a plane actually hitting the Pentagon?
Well, there is one like 5-frame video. Now, there were other videos of this from a hotel and I think a gas station across the road and different things that the FBI had, but they would never release. Well, you would think they would want to release that to put all the conspiracy theorists, to put that whole thing to bed. So this pilot that, had flying lessons, and the people that gave him flying lessons said he could barely fly a Cessna. He can't fly a Cessna, but he flies a 757 in some kind of crazy corkscrew maneuver, gets it to ground level to hit the Pentagon perfect without leaving a skid mark in the grass, and happens to fly it right into the budget analysis office of the Pentagon.
Wait a minute, the budget analysis office. In doing my research for this, I don't know if you all saw this or not, but the day before 9/11, remember Donald Rumsfeld? He was the Secretary of Defense, I think, under Bush.
Yeah.
The day before, and this is an ABC interview, he gives an interview that says they're going to start looking into the military budget, that they couldn't account for something like 23 to 25% of the money spent in the military budget, and it equated to $2.3 trillion. $2.3 trillion that they could not account for in the budget and had no idea where the money was at or spent. Look that up, because that was something. Have you seen that, Brad?
I have. And what was funny is I saw the Donald Rumsfeld thing, and because I knew there was a bunch of money that was missing that they had announced the day before, but I couldn't remember how much it was. So I look it up and I find that video of him saying it on national TV, $2.3 trillion.
Now that was the day before 9/11.
Right.
The day before.
So I go to look up information on it, and like the first thing that pops up says $2.3 trillion Pentagon debunked was a headline. So I was like, well, what's this? So I click on it, and it says something along the lines of, well, the $2.3 trillion, the conspiracy theorists are trying to claim that it was stolen or that it's missing. That's not the case. That's been debunked. They just weren't able to account for it. So let me ask you this, Jimmy Don. If you went to work Monday, and if your accountant called you and you said, hey, Jimmy Don, you've got $300,000 that we can't find. So you go to your secretary and you say, hey, look, we got a problem. We're missing $300,000. And she says, oh, whoa, pump the brakes. No problem. Look, it's a misunderstanding. That $300,000 is not missing. It's just not accounted for.
That makes a lot of sense.
Sounds a lot like the same thing to me.
Right. So that thing it flies into the Pentagon. Now, going back to the $2.3 trillion, we hear these numbers, million, billion, trillion. We hear them so often that I think it really kind of takes the pop away from how much money that actually is. Right? Like, I don't know that most people understand how big of a gap there is between a million, a billion, and a trillion.
Right.
Just kind of put it in perspective. If you did this in increments of time, if you went back 1 million seconds, it would take you back roughly 12 days. I think it's about 11 and a half days. So that seems like a lot of time, but I'd like to have that many dollars, right? But it's still not too impressive, right? Go back 12 days. If you go back 1 billion seconds, it takes you back 32 years. Like 31 and a half years. So if you're listening to this, and if you're 31 years old, you've not lived 1 billion seconds yet. So that still sounds like that's a pretty crazy number.
Right.
1 trillion seconds would take you back almost 32,000 years.
Wow.
Those are some big stacks of money, folks.
$2.3 trillion that they could not account for. And it was announced the day before 9/11, and the plane, supposedly, what it hit at the Pentagon was the budget section.
Budget analysis
division.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's a crazy coincidence, too.
So, like, it's almost like you see these things on Facebook now where something big happens in the news, and you're like, it's the diversion.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not saying it did happen, but I'm saying it's possible that this was all orchestrated by the guys in the shadows. We'll call them what? The Illuminati? People call it Illuminati, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they're calling shots, and then we need Tower 7, make sure it gets knocked. We need to make sure this plane hits here. I know you can't drive a Cessna, but here's your 757. Like, so it's a diversion tactic, basically. Is what
it could be.
Well, it could be.
Well, it could be. So the question is who benefits? So it's always follow the money. We've talked about that on here a bunch of times. So follow the money. So who benefits from this?
Well, the military-industrial complex, right?
Bingo. So we end up going into Iraq. Well, we're supposedly going after Afghanistan.
Hold on now. Not only does the military-industrial complex benefit from this, but it seems like they win more than once. Because first off, not only is the missing money forgot about, now they're about ready to get some blank checks wrote to them, right?
Exactly. And, you've brought this up multiple times in the past few months, talking about the military-industrial complex and these endless wars.
Yeah.
So, you think about the people in power at the time. And here's one thing about me that we all kind of joke around here about, well, you're the lefty and I'm the conservative and Jimmy Don's the independent. Yeah. I have never been affiliated with a stripe as far as, now that I'm a Trump supporter on here, everybody thinks I'm just totally aligned with Republicans. Right. Jimmy Don's known me for years. I've never really supported anybody in any way.
He really kind of dislikes Bush as much as he did Obama.
So you had
Gives you more.
Dick Cheney is the vice president,
Yes.
right? You know what Dick Cheney did before he was vice president?
Randy Halliburton.
Halliburton, yeah.
He was the CEO for Halliburton.
Hmm.
So this guy is the CEO for Halliburton, which, you know, is a defense contractor, and he was the CEO from I think 1995, basically up until he became vice president. Is that right?
Like, I don't know. I'm not sure that he didn't continue in that capacity as CEO of Halliburton. I'm
Well,
sure.
he tried to say that he was completely separated from it, but even his own the financial disclosure statements from 2001, 2, and 3 showed that after becoming vice president, that he received $1.9 million from Halliburton.
Jeez. So he was getting paid by Halliburton even after, well, while he was in the White House.
Right. Plus, he also had a bunch of stock options. So after he became I think in the year 2000, Halliburton was the 22nd largest military contractor. By 2003, this is why he's vice president,
Right.
they jumped to the 7th largest private contractor. And
It's probably coincidence.
oh yeah,
It's like everything else.
Yeah.
So they had in 2001, Halliburton had a contract in the Middle East that was $5 million plus. Now these numbers, most of this stuff is going back to 2003, 4, and 5. So these could have jumped by billions just since then. This is old information. So they had the $5 billion plus contract in the Middle East. In 2003, KBR, which is a subsidiary of Halliburton, received a no-bid contract from the Pentagon worth up to $7 billion. Didn't even have to compete for it.
That's right.
I mean, it's insane. And you see the same players, the same names. They keep
Over
popping
and
up over and over and over. So if you are benefiting from these military contractors, and you are one of the top people in the world making decisions on going to war on this side, and you benefit from war on this side. I mean, it's like being the dentist and also owning the sugar factory.
Right.
Right. Well, I guess this could be considered a sidebar, but have you guys ever seen the movie Vice?
I've not watched it yet.
It's the movie about Dick Cheney.
Right. I don't even want to watch it. It makes me sick.
No, you should watch it.
Really?
Yeah, because everything that Brad's saying, it almost kind of hammers home in this movie. And not to mention Christian Bale looks just like him. It's insane.
Christian Bale's an awesome actor.
He's an amazing actor. Batman to play Dick Cheney. I mean, but it's a really interesting movie. If you've got some time, you know, it will kind of give you a history on him. It definitely doesn't glorify him in any way. and it also it actually shows how he manipulates the law to get himself into the war, why they can do it, and how they did it. It's really pretty interesting. I mean, it's still a movie. You got to take it for what it's worth.
Sure.
But it was still pretty interesting. So, all right. So, obviously, it benefits Halliburton. So, that's, and Dick Cheney. So, there's some money there. Now, the other common idea was always that we were there for the oil, which I think is probably true somewhat. Yeah, and then, maybe getting into Afghanistan. I don't know where the money was there. Maybe there was some money in Afghanistan that they were trying to get after because we spent a lot of time there. Pakistan. But the other real big thing that came out of 9/11 was the Patriot Act.
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, the Patriot Act, which is they scared us into allowing ourselves to be surveilled. And we were like, yeah, absolutely. We gave over a bunch of our freedoms. In my business, there is a form that you sign at closing and in the pre-disclosure package about the Patriot Act.
My biggest concern has always been, and I know I'm going to sound like George Orwell here, but the government having too much control. And I think it's a Ben Franklin quote that says, if people are willing to give up their freedoms for security, then they deserve neither one. Is that right? It's pretty close to that. But, And then here we come along with this Patriot Act where these intelligence agencies can basically run roughshod through every kind of law we've ever known to be on their books, invade all the privacies that we've ever had, and it's just not.
And we did it willingly.
Oh, we was tickled to death to do it. And, talk about coincidences, man. After this 9/11, what better way to scare people into approving that, man? Hey, man, either you're with us or against us. You remember the George Bush speech?
Yep.
Either you're with us or you're with the terrorists.
Hey, baby, we're USA all the way, right?
And everything is driven by fear. And just a few of the points from the Patriot Act, for those that might not be familiar with it, it was intended to prevent terrorist attacks, which everybody was for at the time. Like JD said, you get everybody scared to death. Well, yeah, this happened. We don't want it to happen again. Where do we sign up to fix it? But it allowed any law enforcement officials to skirt a citizen's Fourth Amendment protections against reasonable search and seizures. It also granted agencies like the FBI sweeping surveillance powers over cell phone data, internet search history, medical records, library records, and also allowed for the indefinite detention of anyone without probable cause.
Wow.
I mean, that should be... if you went back to our forefathers and you think about where the Fourth Amendment came from. So it's would anybody have went for this, though, if they came out and they said, okay, here's the deal, we're going to change some laws here. We know you kind of got this Constitution or whatever, but we're living in different times. So going forward, if we think that somebody's a terrorist, we're just going to come through and search your house, search your effects, just kind of go through what we want to. You're also... Now, we're going to go through all of your search history on the internet. We're going to go through all these things. Are you good with doing that?
I mean, well, it's just basically saying due process is non-existent.
Right.
Right? Like, just forget about it. We're going to hold you as long as we want to. We're going to have all the evidence that we can possibly gather against you. And what's frustrating to me, like, and I'm speaking, man, this ain't got nothing to do with, it has to do with the Patriot Act, but I'm not talking about definitions of the Patriot Act, but it's like people are like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't be worried about it. But then, man, you see things like the Great Hack. Or you see these campaigns, man. Don't give up your privacy, guys. And here I'm saying this, but who gets on Facebook every day?
Yeah.
Who gets on Instagram every day? Who's on Twitter all the time? Me. But I'm telling you, don't sign up to give away your rights.
And, because I hear that all the time. I've heard a million people say that. Well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't care what somebody's looking at. And besides the point of just wanting your privacy anyway, I think one thing people don't realize is the average person, commits like 2 or 3 felonies a day, right? Because you got all these crazy laws written. And it was one of the, like Joseph Goebbels or one of those people years ago said, you find me the man and I'll find you the crime.
Right.
So you think with this surveillance and all these different, if they want, do you think if an intelligence apparatus wanted to come after you for anything, could they not come through your life and find something that, well, I'll tell you what, JD, we actually had you jaywalking down on Main Street, whatever, they'll come up with something.
Sure.
So I'm with you 100%. Due process is one of the things we just can't let go of, because you lose everything with that.
Right.
I always say that the First and Second Amendments are most important, but really they're backed up with these. You got the Patriot Act, you got obviously the being able to enrich themselves through the companies that they work for, who they're getting money for.
So let me say, because I kind of took it in the direction of the Patriot Act there, but I want to go in a different direction too. And I'm just wondering if you guys believe that the reason that we went over into the Middle East was for oil, or were there other reasons that maybe we went into the Middle East? Do you think it was strictly for the oil?
I never have believed it was the oil. I never believed that. I don't think we ever, and I don't know, I don't have the numbers backs up. I just know at the gas pump, I never did feel the effects if we got as much of the oil. I'm not saying we didn't, but I've never felt the effects of it or seen the effects of it. I think the reason we went to the Middle East is first off, we was just looking for a fight. We were pissed off, and we're going to go to Afghanistan where there's nothing anyway and destroy everything. And rightfully so, I think. They're harboring terrorists. I thought that was actually, I was okay with that. I wasn't behind the Iraq war until General Colin Powell testified before the Senate that we needed to go. And then I was like, all right, if Colin Powell says we need to go, General of the Army, he knows more than I do, I'm behind it, let's go. Because these weapons of mass destruction are obviously being moved around in these. I don't know if you guys remember that briefing he did to the Senate, but he showed these trucks moving in these facilities and they're moving all this stuff around. Guys, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I mean,
there were none.
And there were none. And Bush came out and even laughed about it after that. It's like, well, we thought there was weapons of mass destruction. There wasn't. So,
and to Bush's credit, though, he only knows what he's being told, right, by these intelligence people.
But if you don't get the right information,
right, absolutely,
and you are the leader of the free world, then you have to put those people in place to get the information.
Sure, absolutely.
And with most of these wars, almost all of them going back, and I could be way off base, but I just happen to believe that the need for them to go to war comes well before the cause are actually initiating going. Just like the oil, I think that oil is part of why they went to Iraq, but I don't think that they did it with any intent that they were going to pass the savings on to us.
Right.
But I'm going to go to a different direction in the Middle East.
Okay.
There's a lot of evidence that leads towards Saudi Arabia and Iran for these different things. But where did we go?
I mean, we started out, Bin Laden.
And then we went to Afghanistan.
Right.
So we went over there to Afghanistan to find Bin Laden. And then, however many years later, what year was that they said the SEALs catch him, and then we bury him at sea. And the one thing I heard was, well, they didn't, it was too dramatic for the American public, to see his face or whatever. And I'm like, well, you hung Saddam Hussein from a noose on live television.
Right.
But this guy that takes down the Twin Towers, you're going to give him an honorary burial at sea. And then there was a number of those SEALs that were the ones that went in and caught him that died in a plane or a helicopter crash, here a few years back.
Right.
I'm not making Saddam or Bin Laden a good guy. I'm sure he was a horrible guy and a terrorist and whatever. I'm just saying this particular thing, it almost looks like he was just to be the face of it.
Well,
so to go in,
right.
So what would drive you if you needed to go into Afghanistan? He would be somebody that would take you there, right? Because that's where he's at.
But
so
why would you go into Afghanistan, though, is the question. What's in Afghanistan that would make you want to go there?
Poppy.
Heroin.
Heroin.
So, would you say...
Have you not heard this? Was that
in the last 18 years, and we have in Eastern Kentucky, I mean, I know it's bad all over the world. I don't know how many friends I've lost in the last 15 years for heroin overdoses. But would you say that the opioid crisis has been worse in the last 20 years?
Yes.
Okay, so
for sure for us. I mean, especially where we live, it's been awful.
So throughout history, there was actually a big opium crisis in China in the 1800s. Went in and really tore down their society. So they kind of know the blueprint. I think that's where a lot of this is coming with the fentanyl and whatever, that they're saying they're trying to push into the country. But in 2000, the Taliban banned opium production in Afghanistan. And you had a lot of farmers and different people that were farming the opium. Because at that time, they were like, one of the top in the world for opium. So the Taliban bans everybody from growing opium. So, the first thing you think was, oh, well, that's a good thing. They're trying to shut it down. But it might have just been a way to eliminate the competition,
Right.
Right? So by mid 2001, there was basically no opium being produced. And, in a nation that was usually led the world in production. Well, in 2002, the U.S. and NATO nations signed a worldwide ban on opium production. Said that nobody could grow it.
Right.
So you would think, okay, well, we're doing away with opium, right? The UN and everybody's involved do away with opium. But since we have been in Afghanistan, the opium trade has flourished like never before. It keeps growing and growing and growing. So again, I don't want to think that we would go in somewhere to actually help a business that is being destructive in our own country. I would just like for somebody to explain to me why we've been there. And if we have been there, then why are we not doing anything to shut down the opium trade?
No, I think it's a great point. I can't answer it. I don't know. I know that we got a real dilemma here in East Kentucky, and I think it's not just East Kentucky, guys. If you look at the numbers of opium abuse nationwide, it's a serious problem. But why are we still there? I know we're not there in the numbers we were before, but we're still there for... Do you know why? I can't figure out why. They say they want to train these guys up. Train them up to do what, man? There's nobody to fight against them, right? Let's get out of there. It's very possible we went there for that. I mean, it really is. I just think, though, with Iraq, I think we just was looking for a fight. And I think we needed to win under our belt, and we knew we could go in there and win. That's my thought on Iraq. Afghanistan.
Well, the Afghanistan thing, I can't say that I didn't know, but I didn't know that's where you were going. It was with that, and I think that could be a real interesting podcast for us to do, is the effects of opioids on Eastern Kentucky.
Right.
And maybe since 9/11, since we went over there. I think that's definitely something we ought to talk about at some point.
For sure.
Could be a good one.
And again, we're talking about topics like this, and they can obviously be very controversial. And a lot of these things we're talking about are might not even be something we take a stance on. We just want to have the conversation that people can ask questions themselves and saying, does this make sense?
Yeah, I don't plan on getting on a plane anytime soon after this. I can tell you that right.
No, it's never been safer to fly. As far as going through, checkout, man, I said it's when you're trying to go through all the metal detectors and then the pat downs and all the different things you got to do now to fly. It's kind of crazy.
I'm like Ron White, though. I go through a pat down. I like to pop a Viagra about an hour before the man a pat down.
So, anything else we want to cover on that 9/11 discussion?
Well,
I think that's
I just want to say one more thing about the Patriot Act. And I think this is why Edward Snowden, to me, is a hero, guys. He's not a traitor. He's not a spy. This guy come out and let us know what the government was doing. Every time you drive past a cell phone tower, and they got your information, man.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you, Patriot Act. It's crazy.
Well, now you got facial recognition software. We're doing it on our phones.
Oh, and we think it's the greatest thing ever was.
Yeah, I don't even have to type in passcode anymore. Just my face.
Yeah, how lazy are you, man?
Well, you go on a Disney cruise, and that's how they recognize you, is by facial recognition, because there's a play area for your kids where you can actually drop your kids off. It's a big fun zone thing. And when you go, their cameras pick up your face, and they know that if you're with that child or not.
They know where you're at.
It's crazy. So, I don't think if we got anything else, we'll kind of move on to our last segment here. But that was a good discussion. I hope that people listening kind of dig that, because I think that was really interesting. And we appreciate those listeners who are listening to us that actually suggested we talk about that, because that was awesome. So, all right. So the last segment that we've been doing here lately is our college football picks. Last week was a little rough for me. I went 2-3. JD went 3-2. And for all the crap that JD talked about Brad last week, Brad went 5-0.
Stupid Clemson.
Yeah, we'll blame it on Clemson. So, guys,
maybe you do have some insight down there with Alex Jones. You know what I mean? That's what I said. You remember, right? Oh.
As far as the weekend goes, Kentucky had another good win. But really, the main storyline from that game was Terry Wilson got hurt, and found out just really before we came on here that he was out for the season. Yeah. And so that hurts. I think the backup quarterback came from Tulane. Was a starting quarterback at Tulane, and I think that he can do a pretty good job. Threw for 2 touchdowns last night after Terry got hurt. But so, all right, JD, what are the actual standings? Week 2. So Jimmy D went 2-3 this week, 7-3 now overall. Brad went 5-0. He is 9-1 overall, and JD went 3-2. He is 6-4 overall. So that would be Brad, Jimmy Don, and JD in that order.
Why does the football guy always do bad at these things?
I don't know. But Brad did text JD a picture today. Said, I hope to keep this streak alive. I've already got JD's outfit picked out. So JD, I would appreciate if you would post that on our Facebook page.
I will, definitely.
See JD's outfit. So the games this week, guys, that we picked out. First one, let's do Iowa versus Iowa State. Iowa State is a 3.5-point favorite.
I'll take Iowa State.
You take Iowa State, Brad?
Iowa.
I'm going to take Iowa State. Why am I going with JD? He's last. Maybe I need to go with Brad. The next one would be USC versus Texas. Texas a 3.5-point favorite.
Man, Texas or USC screwed me this week too, man.
Dude, they blasted Stanford.
I did not see that coming.
I didn't either. They blasted Stanford.
But apparently Brad did.
Brad knew it.
Okay, I'll go USC. I'm going with them this week. I roll with them.
Brad, who you got?
Texas.
I'm on Texas as well. I thought the Texas LSU game was a good ball game last night. A lot of scoring. LSU looks to be halfway decent too. Their quarterback stepped up big last night. Then we got Oklahoma. Oklahoma's an 11.5-point favorite versus UCLA.
I take the Sooners.
I like the Sooners too.
Oklahoma.
Okay. Then we got Arizona State versus Michigan State. Michigan State's a 7-point favorite.
Who's 7-point favorite?
Michigan State over Arizona State.
Yeah, I'll go with the Spartans.
Who coaches at Arizona State now? Is that Rich Rod, the one that used to be?
No, I think one of the Stoops brothers. No, he's
no.
He's
it's
Arizona.
the cat that Herm Edwards used to be.
Oh yeah, he's the worst coach ever.
Yeah, I'm going Sparties.
Michigan State.
All right, JD, who'd you go with?
Michigan State.
Okay, so 3 Michigan States on that one, and then last but not least, our beloved Kentucky Wildcats, who are a 7-point dog to the Florida Gators.
I'm taking the Cats, baby. I'm rolling with the Cats on this one. I think Florida's overrated.
I'm taking the Cats.
Oh, I'm always taking the Cats, man. I think we're going to bust Florida again. I think our running game last night looked stout. Our offensive and defensive lines are good. Florida really, really likes to blitz, but I think that's going to create some holes for our guys because our offensive lines are good, and I think it's going to create some alleys for our running backs. And
Smoke does not look bad, man.
No, dude, Smoke looks good. Rodriguez looks good, and so does AJ. I mean,
Yeah.
AJ Rose looks awesome too. So, I mean, I think all 3 of them look really good.
Just to throw this out there, last time we turned to a backup quarterback, that was Steven Johnson, and it seemed to work out for us.
Seemed to work out just fine, didn't it? So,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, this guy was actually in all the preseason, hype or whatever. He was actually ranked ahead of Terry Wilson.
Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this quarterback was, and he had, he was really good. And he played under Neil Brown. Apparently, he can run the same system.
Right.
So I think he'll do okay. I don't think it's Terry. Terry's a lot more explosive,
Athletic.
and they were really letting him kind of do it last night because he ran the ball a lot. I don't know. I think it's going to be a fun game. I will be at Kroger Field, yelling like a madman. I can't wait.
And that's why, I didn't get to watch one snap of the ball game. I listened to it on radio. As soon as I turned the ball game on the radio, Terry Wilson gets horse collar tackled and hurt. This is why the horse collar tackle is illegal, guys. It's a safety thing. I hate to see it happen to Terry. It's a tough break. I don't even know what quarter that was in, but he may be
I
getting
think it was
in
the third quarter.
So redshirt season's even out for him.
Is it?
5 quarters is all you can play. You can get a redshirt, but he might get.
No, I think they changed it where you can do like 3 games.
Maybe.
Because some of the guys played. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but
I could be wrong too.
because they were talking last night, maybe a medical red shirt for him.
But now medical redshirt may be different.
Yeah, they were talking maybe medical red shirt. So,
But can I talk a minute about the high school?
well, yeah, go ahead.
We went to Harlan County this week. Guys, I'm telling you, this is the most beautiful high school facilities. setting I've ever coached at or played at. It was nice, beautiful. The fan base was class acts. The coaching staff were class acts. They fed us after the games. You know, it was a pretty cool experience. Unfortunately, we lost. Bigger school. It was good. Well coached. They're going to have a good season. We're looking forward to still another good season. And I think we'll get things rolling again this week.
That's cool, man. Good. I wanted to go up. I was having a hard time catching up with the score. There is a live stream score app that you can go through, but I think it takes parents and somebody else to actually update. So I was looking for the score.
Right.
So guys, I guess that'll wrap this week's show up. We want to thank you guys for listening, and also I hate to ask for help necessarily, but if you like what we're doing here and you dig listening to the show, please go to iTunes and subscribe. Get that automatic download. Podbean, you can download the Podbean app and find us on there. Yeah, totally free. We don't charge anything for this, so go subscribe. It'll help us out. We are also now on Spotify as of yesterday, and hopefully very soon we will be on YouTube. I'm working on it. I just don't think I got it quite figured out yet. So, but guys, the way we always end the show, no matter how bad your week's been, no matter how bad your day's been, if you just add bourbon, it always gets a little bit better. See you next week.